I'm honored to open season 6 with Denise Mannix, a trailblazer in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion. As a founder of Equity in Leadership and president of Lean and Network Energy, Denise has dedicated her career to advancing gender equity in leadership and executive roles. With a soon to be completed PhD focusing on gender equity in executive leadership, Denise combines deep research, powerful advocacy, and impactful influence. A sought after speaker, moderator, and thought leader, Denise's tireless energy and forthright approach are hallmarks of her inspiring journey. Having triumphed over a difficult battle with cancer, she continues to channel her strength and commitment towards advancing gender equity, inspiring countless others along the way, including myself. Denise and I were neighbors, and I've always admired her home, especially during the festive cheer of Christmas. Strangely enough, it was only when she was about to leave the neighborhood that I had the chance to truly connect with her. What began as a chance encounter has grown into a deep admiration for her work and her journey, and I'm delighted to bring her inspiring story to my audience today. A very warm welcome to Atlanta Diaries, Denise, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much for your kind words. I'm truly touched. And in fact, you've made me a bit teary. So we've got to get on with this now.
Absolutely, right. I just believe it's serendipity, Denise. I mean, the way we met and the way we instantly connected, and your amazing husband and you really left a mark on both of us. So I'm so glad we could do this. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Denise, let's go back to your early years. And before we, jump into the present, I'd love for you to share with me how did your early years shape your journey and the person you've become today?
I think that's a really critical question because it's taken me a lifetime to actually understand the journeys that I had. I was born as a British subject in India with a family that, was always in India in the far back generations. And then we went to England for a number of years, and then we went to Australia where I basically grew up from the age of 8. And the reason I say that is because it was only a few short years ago when I began my PhD in gender equity that one of the first questions that you're asked is, what is your orientation towards your subject of interest? And the whole area of gender equity is built around the concept of difference and power, etc. And that difference concept really has influenced me. And I didn't realize that till I started my PhD. And I was really forced to think about why I always felt like I didn't belong anywhere. I didn't belong in India. I didn't belong in England. I really didn't belong in Australia, even though I feel like it is home. And then I've transported here to the US where I've been for 16 years. So it's a journey that has been really created out of my sense of difference. And I think for many women, whatever that sense of difference that they have can dictate their life story. And so that's been a really powerful piece for me. And I started my life as a high school teacher. And from that, after about 15 years in a couple of children, I did a very traditional thing about, wanting to be a stay-at-home mum. And I realized, oh, I don't like this. This is not who I am. And so my father and my husband had always said to me, what are you doing teaching, Denise? And I love teaching. I loved the teaching aspect of it. I didn't like the administrative parts. I didn't like the politics because, in every business place, regardless of whether it's at a top corporate area or whether it's in a local Catholic school, you have politics. And so I went into the training management field. And really, I'd always been interested in concepts to do with leadership. And so, as fate will have it, I ended up working in the area of organizational development, where I've been asked to build the capability of an HR team more as business partners. And fast forward here today, where I'm working in the field of gender equity or gender balance, but also elevate women in that process. I hope that gives you a expose of what now starts to sound like a very, very long life, and I hope it's going to continue.
This was perfect, Denise. I think it's given a lot of context, so thank you for that. You use the word differences again and again, right? So I'm just wondering what really was a pivotal point when you started noticing these differences despite having I want to say, a fairly equitable background, household, family, so to speak.
Exactly. It never dawned on me that life wasn't going to be fair to me. And I think the first time I really understood how ISM, was impacting me, and there was probably a tinge of sexism, but there was also a tinge of ageism, but it was reverse ageism because at the age of 15, and I was in year 10 at that stage, and I entered into a public speaking competition, and all of them were year 12 students. And what was interesting was that the ageism piece came into it because rather than give me or award me the prize for the best speaker, which by all accounts, and I can remember this clearly, people were coming up to me and saying that was amazing, especially given that you're so young. And it was a very different type of speech to what everyone else was doing. But they made a big point when they were making the awards of saying, we're not going to give it to Denise because she's young, and we want to be fair to the older ones, which I thought was interesting because no one's ever been fair to me as I've got older. And I remember thinking at the time, there's something not right with this. Now, did it make me some sort of feminist or no, it didn't. But it started to show me that life wasn't like the Fitzpatrick, which is what my maiden name was, within the confines of my very, very wonderful childhood. And so, having parents who said that the world was our oyster for their three girls. And so it started to show even at those times. And then you start looking around and you realize that the young women, if they were smart enough, you'd go to university. And if you really weren't, you'd go to technical college or you went to nursing or one of those sorts of things. And so I had a very traditional story that you read about in all the research.
Mm.
And so the awakening came very quickly when I started work in a Catholic school, at the same Catholic school that I went to school in. And when I had become, a bit more of a seasoned teacher after 5 years or whatever, where on a couple of occasions when I put myself forward against other people for roles as lead teacher or, in charge head of the department, I was overlooked because it was deemed that I was too young, I was a female, and then the principal, who was a nun at the time, suggested that in actual fact, it was better that, the men be given those roles.
Wow. Mm.
And I thought, here I am, a young woman who, did all the things that you would think would be the right way to go about getting into that hierarchy of jobs. And it still wasn't good enough because I really didn't have the appendage that I needed.
Mm.
And it had nothing to do with my degree.
Wow.
Sorry to be crude.
Yeah, clearly it left a huge impact.
It did, yeah.
So, how did your career evolve from a teacher to an OD expert?
I realized when I was much younger, I have a lot to say. And hopefully I've learned more humility over the years. But I did realize that what the classroom had taught me
Mm.
was to facilitate the learning and the inquiry and even, if you like, influence on a group of people. And some of them in the beginning were only a few years younger than me because I was quite young, finishing my university teaching degree, etc. And so I was an English and I was a history teacher. And in terms of history, which I love, I'd often looked at what made the difference between how something happened and how something didn't happen. And the leadership, even, when as a young girl reading The Diary of Anne Frank and realizing the choices that people make around doing something of import in their lives. And I think without realizing, I knew that I could perhaps through my teaching experience, I could translate that in some way into the world of work. And to be honest with you, I didn't use the words influence then. I realized that that's what I'm doing now, but it was more around the interest that you have as a teacher in these amazing people that you have in front of you and the questions that they'd ask and the facilitation of their learning and their understanding, the impact that you have on them. I think that's what engendered my interest in leadership and design of organizations in terms of how we can make it better for people to work and to thrive and to be successful in any of the numerous ways that success looks like for an individual.
Very fascinating. And it's interesting, like you said, you always think of these things in hindsight, right? And without really being intentional about it, looks like you had a lot of role models in a sense, or people you learned from or who inspired you. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, I think in one way you're absolutely correct. And it also worked in reverse. It was looking at people who had made huge impact on the world or on countries that were perhaps not the leaders that we would encourage.
Hmm.
And so that for me was about talking about things and looking at why is it that people will choose to follow someone who is not a good person? Why is it that some people or a lot of people will choose to follow people who are good people?
Hmm.
What are those qualities? Because one of the things that I learned through the process of doing a lot of my leadership studies and looking at different types of programs for leadership is that as a leader, you can't command that people follow you unless, there are certain types of leaders that require that. But a true leader is someone who people choose to follow
Absolutely. Yeah.
because good leaders are all different. They all represent something different. And that's why the gender equity piece is so important. It's because it's not founded in gender, it's founded in good people, it's founded in human beings, whether we're male or female. And if we go beyond the binary, it's about just what is it that you offer to other people that make them want to listen to you, make them want to be influenced by you in a good way. And I think that for me was always really important.
Let's shift gears. And you said that you felt that you didn't belong to any one particular culture. It was more global, right? So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about that. And therefore, how do you identify yourself in a sense?
Well, it's really interesting that you asked that because, my enlightenment has been, continuing. So, when they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, you certainly can. Because, for many years, I'd always told the story of my family growing up in India. And one of my grandma was from Goa and she was Portuguese background. Also, she told us. She's very small, very dark. And my grandfather was a tall, blue-eyed, blonde-haired Irishman. So their children ranged from the pinkest of the pink in colour to the blackest of the black. But even through all of that, what was interesting was that despite the colour, differences in our families, and even in my own family, it never dawned on me, which I know is really crazy when you think about it, but it's also telling you how socially conformist we really are, is that I never acknowledged the fact that there was colour in our family, like in me, for example, not in that family, but we were still what we would call Brits. And even though we were very ethnic in how we were raised as a European family in an Asian environment, it was just really interesting. Anyway, long story short, when I started to do this work, because, I'd be talking to others who are women of colour, and I realised I'm a woman of colour. My family couldn't be more colourful if they tried. Because I was born as a British subject, I was British, which ultimately meant, kind of white. And it was interesting because my grandfather on my mum's side and my mother were rejected on the basis of the White Australia policy. Because in those days, it was called the White Australia policy. They weren't considered white enough. And if you ever saw my mum or you saw my grandfather, they were no more tanned in reality than any Australian who was walking down the street from being on the beach. And so, in actual fact, my mum was very fair, though she had dark hair. So, all of this started to come together in some shape or form. And it's given me some amazing insights into who I am and how I can better relate to the impact of life on lots of women.
Let's move to the present now, Denise.
Mm-hmm.
What was the pivotal moment? Like, clearly looks like everything was leading to, this pressing need to advocate. So what was the pivotal moment when you decided this is it now?
Yeah, I think that two things coincided. I began my PhD, as it was, gender equity, and just really my interest in women, over the years, and having been a teacher largely of women and my experiences in the workplace, I really thought that was a good place to, put my feet under the table. And at the same time, I was asked to become a board member for the global nonprofit Lean In Network Energy. And as I started to do some work in that nonprofit area, and as well as do some of the research towards my PhD, a lot of things started, I wouldn't say fall into place, but they were lining themselves up.
Mhm.
And very quickly, I realized that there was something in this. Several years earlier, I had been diagnosed with breast cancer and went through that whole process, went through a mastectomy, went through a tram flap to give myself a new breast and all these things, which took, a couple of years. And then, as it so happened, I opened my mouth again, to say something about, my impatience for things happening. And I was voted in as the president of the Lean In Network Energy program. So I really took off on that. And even though I created equity and leadership, I really have devoted most of my time to working in this very large landscape, which is the energy sector, which really needs more women in huge amounts, women who have left to come back and make a difference, and just more women in terms of sheer skill sets. And there's also this wonderful piece, which I'll just throw in here, because there's so many good people in this transition in the energy sector from the old fossil fuels to the renewables and clean energy, alternative energy, etc., who are saying we might be in a very different situation. if we had had more women at the senior end of businesses in energy. And so that's been very impactful for me. So I really, really feel that I need to progress women in the energy sector through greater collaboration and greater partnership amongst women. I think what the world has taught us is that, the space for contributions to something like, a women's organization is limited. And so we all fight for that space. And I think we've done ourselves a disservice. And I am absolutely on a mission that to ensure that we work harder together in what is a really important space. So that's kind of how I got to where I am. And then last year, probably about 12 months away from finishing my PhD, when I was diagnosed with another female cancer, ovarian cancer. Anyway, dealt with all of that. And I think I really was dealing with my own mortality because unlike breast cancer, when you walk away and you've been healed, they call it you're cancer free. With ovarian cancer, I was just in remission. That was a startling difference to me. And, my husband was very angry. I've known him since I was 15 years old. We've been married for 46 years. And when I looked at his face the second time that I had cancer, and this time this horrible cancer that is going to reside somewhere in my body till it appears again. If I can get through the first couple of years, I've got a good opportunity for success, but there's a 95% plus chance that it's going to come back. So he was very angry, and he was angry with everything. He was angry with God. He was angry with the fact that this was happening to us. And so I said to him, no, I said, there has to be a reason. And I have a friend who said to me, even with her great depth of faith and belief, she said that she struggles with the fact that good people have bad things happen to them. And I said, look, I don't blame God. He's got bigger things to worry about than whether or not Denise Mannix gets cancer twice in her lifetime. But I knew that there had to be a reason. If not a reason, there had to be a purpose. And so I was on a bit of a mission, and I kept saying to people, there's going to be a purpose, because they'd look at me and they'd say, oh, I'm so sorry for you. I said, no, please, I don't need you to feel sorry for me. And I look at it in a very different way. I am the only protagonist in my life. Cancer is only an antagonist, and I refuse to call myself a survivor. For me to be a survivor means I've been a victim, and I will not see myself as a victim. It's not going to give me my identification of who I am. And so I will not allow it to define me. And so all of this led me to try to determine my purpose in the midst of all the other stuff that was going on and my PhD and all that kind of thing. And so I was talking to a very dear friend in Australia, and I said, oh, Ruth, I need to find the purpose. And so she listened to me while I rambled, because I'm a good rambler. And she said, have you finished now? And I said, yep. And, words of enlightenment. And she said, well, Denise, I want you to listen to me now. I said, okay, I'm listening. And she said, you've always known your purpose. You just haven't acknowledged it. Wow. I'm being led a life lesson here, And so what she said was that as long as she's known me, I've been a strong influencer. Mm. And she said, your purpose is to influence. And she said, you're already on that path. And, there was an ease that came over my soul when she said that, because I thought, I was out there searching. There's this unknown purpose. The purpose was inside me. And it went with my belief about being a protagonist in my own life. And I've had cancer twice now. And touch wood, I have beaten it twice. And I don't intend to be in that 95, 96, 97% who get it again. And if I do, I'll just keep fighting because I'm not ready to go yet. And so I think for me, it's the realization that I have a legacy that I want to leave. I have a purpose and I'm driven. I'm just not ready to let go of this earth, not quite yet. And if people don't like my opinions, so what? What can they do to me? That cancer, it's already taken most of my hair. It's already taken my eyebrows and my eyelashes and teeth and everything else. So it's time for me to be totally, I won't say secure, but accept who I am, what I'm doing, and go out and do it. And if you want to listen, listen. If you don't, I'll challenge you to find alternatives that are better than the discussion that we can have and the sort of thing that we're doing right here. So when I stand up on stage and I talk at a conference, as I've done this year in Houston, I've done it in Bahrain, I've done it in Abu Dhabi. You don't like what I have to say? I don't care. Someone will. And I've met the most amazing women and men through that process.
My God, Denise, I'm actually getting goosebumps listening. There's often this feeling of, am I doing enough? And today was a life lesson for me. I feel universe just keeps on sending you people to remind you of your purpose. And today you've done that to me, Denise. So thank you so much. And I really appreciate your courage, your resilience, and I can't give a damn about what people. I'm here on a mission to share what I want to share. I love it.
Look, as I keep saying, what can you do to me that cancer has already done? And look, I'm probably making it sound really easy. Do I wake up every morning knowing that the niggle in my belly could be that this damn cancer has come back? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I've met so many women who are in fear of getting the cancer again
Mm.
that I've seen what it's done to their lives. And so, even with decisions that we're making now, my husband and I, we're doing it because of the fact that I'm not going to live my life close to MD Anderson, the best cancer hospital in the world. And if it comes back, if it happens, we will deal with it. I don't know what that looks like, but I didn't know what it looked like the first time it happened or the second time it happened. And I've had in my lifetime, and my husband and I, we lost a child as well, early stages of development in my womb. And so if I had to tell you the impact of any of these three elements in my life, the one that I, to this day, am heart sorrowed over is that child. So all of us have a story. All of us have challenges. It's what we do with that. And there's all these trite, wonderful things that people say about, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. No, it's the fight that you have that makes you stronger. And so I think it's really important that you find your purpose.
Yep.
You have a conversation with yourself that says, I am going to be strong. I'm going to be positive. I'm going to listen to myself when I speak. Am I being negative about something? Am I really creating the emphasis in my life that I want to create? And so even now, my husband and I, are making decisions about the fact that, we've been together for a very long time and it's our time now. So we need to make decisions that are constructive and positive. And the best thing I ever did was start my PhD, not because of the amazing knowledge that it's given me, but because of the thinking power it's given me, to be able to draw ideas and think about things that people are saying, that others are saying, and what we need to do. So I won't go as far as to say I thank cancer for showing up in my life. I could absolutely done without it. But, it's not going to defeat me. And all of us have that ability within ourselves, and that we've got to draw on that so that we can live the lives that we were meant to lead.
Thank you, Denise. I'd love to understand through your PhD and many different trips where you met so many amazing people and advocated such compelling causes. Can you sort of share challenges which we need to address?
Absolutely. One of the most important things that I've learned in terms of women is that regardless of culture, race, religion, we are women. And it's not our differences that we need to be focused on as women. It's those things that challenge all of us as women. And so when you look at the rollback that is occurring around diversity and even gender equity, and you know, I'm not going to get into a political discussion, but I mean, none more prevalent than here in the US, but it's occurring around the world with a lot of right-wing misogyny and with extremism. Women are now more than ever finding the need to stand up and be counted. And we have to realize, regardless of culture or race or faith, that we have the ability to work with really good male allies who do exist. I've met them and they're fantastic people. So that is really important. The other aspect of that is what I've seen at conferences in the Middle East recently, the work that is happening there and the painstaking advances that are taking place should make what's happening in the Western world sit up and take notice. Because if some of those countries, and I include not only the Middle East, I include the work that's being done by women in sub-Saharan Africa, I include the work that's being done in India. There are a lot of things that these women, all of us, are doing that is very much the same. Yeah, it might have local differences and all that kind of stuff. But, the advances in some of those countries are further forward than, what we've been able to achieve across the last 50 years in terms of, what's going on in the West. So that piece around all of us is really important. And I think we've got to remember that. The second piece of that is women are trying to be leaders in businesses and in constructs that were never built for us because they weren't built by us. We would never have built a lot of these things. And yet we've spent the last 50, 60, 70 years trying to operate in a world that is just alien to how we would want to operate. So we've got to acknowledge the power, but utilize the power of those who have the power and work that way to change frameworks, work through them, with them, encourage them. A lot of people, a lot of men, have daughters. They want the best for them, the same that they would want for their sons. So I think it's important that we really need to reframe how we're getting to where we need to be. I think that's absolutely important. I think the third piece is what I've already spoken about, and that is we need to collaborate and partner better.
Mm.
This is not one-upmanship. It is about celebrating everything that is positive and moving forward for women. If someone out there is doing something, I'm happy to celebrate that. And I hope that people, men and women, see the value of making the world a better place for all of us. And I think I once said at a conference a couple of years ago, and it was a gas tech conference in Milan, and I was invited to a leadership roundtable, and they were talking about net zero and a whole range of things. And so I thought, oh, in for a penny, in for a pound. And I said, if you've been talking for the last 14 years about finding solutions to some of these issues that you're talking about, and what I said then was, Have you ever considered you have the wrong people sitting at the table? And I think that that is really often what is the problem. And so it's not about getting diverse voices, it's about getting the voices that are going to make a change and that are going to have some impact on and how things are going to be done for the future. And they don't have to be, young voices. They don't have to be only old voices. They don't have to be anything in between. And it's like now, as I said, even when I went to ADIPEC, I said, the bright shiny ball at now is artificial intelligence. Just like 5 years ago, diversity was the bright shiny ball. Well, we don't need bright shiny balls in our life. We really need to focus on the things that are going to make a difference. And my concern with artificial intelligence, for example, especially for women, is that so much of artificial intelligence is being designed by young mid-20s males who have engineering style brains, who may be a bit out there, and that's fine. But they're not going to be thinking of how I'm going to want to write a response to something. So, we've got to be really careful because AI is not gender neutral. And we've got to be really careful we're going down a path here. So I think we have to make sure we get a seat at the table. And I know that that's a very old saying, but we just got to make it happen. And sitting quietly and working hard and hoping to be noticed is not going to get us where we need to get. We need to band together. We need to have common language. We need to have a genuine regard for each other in order to move forward.
Denise, any initiatives in your travels or in your research where you've seen this really coming through?
I think that genuinely that's a really hard question because I think we've made a lot of missteps along the way. But I think the celebration through awards, etc., for everything from academic excellence to technology excellence that women and men have contributed to is really important. And I've seen that work, especially in places that I recently came back from with LEWAS, which is an awards and leadership symposium to support gender balance. And that showed me what can be done through the energy of women and some very, very strong men, which is fantastic. There's also another group that I've had the great kindness to be part of, and Lean In Network Energy has, and that is with ISAW International, and they've created a platform called Lift. This year it has been released. We were part of the pilot for the program, and it is an accelerator for women, and companies can purchase it, and it really provides access for women. I call it a mix between LinkedIn and Wikipedia for women. And it's got the ability to connect with other people and look at what's worked and what hasn't worked. One of the things that I'll say about the question that you're asking is that I hear a lot of people automatically go to mentoring for women as if it's the be all and end all. And research has shown that mentoring only works under very specific conditions. And you need to understand what mentoring constitutes and what the environment of the organisation that it's occurring in, what it offers you. Because otherwise, it doesn't change anything for the women who are involved. So I really hear the word mentoring being thrown around all the time. So be very careful to understand the social science research that goes behind this. The other aspect of all of this from a social science perspective is understanding what we've created cognitive dissonance in our organisations when we've tried to put in place diversity programs because we've mandated it. We've said people, you will check the box on this program. And that's what companies have done. And they forced people to participate. And you can't train people through a mandatory program that lasts for half an hour how to think differently about all the biases that they might have. You can't do that. But there are other things that social scientists have told us that do work. And it's about time when we do it, we get serious about how we do things and prevent that cognitive dissonance and prevent the fact that we disenfranchised a whole group of people, largely men, who could help us, but we've disenfranchised them because we've made diversity such a mandated expression of gender equity, which it shouldn't be. So those are my 2 words of warning. And where I'm going to be spending a lot of my time will really be working on the principle of working with other women and working with males in power to achieve what we need to achieve. That's what I think is going to work. And I do believe it's a top-down approach because in our organisations, if we want change to happen, it will only happen if we have senior executives, so we have the C-suite and boards, being very committed to the issues that matter. And studies have shown that if the CEO of a company truly believes in these things, that you are more likely to have executives further down the food chain who will support. And, the old adage that our leaders create culture is more important now than it's ever been. And we're losing it if we don't address the executives that we need to get on board with this. I mean, what's the point of having a mentorship program if after 3 or 5 years you still have the same number of lack of women in executive positions or on the board than you had 5 years earlier? It means it's not working. And you need to look at these things, and people who build mentorship programs need to understand what works and why it works. I mean, we're human beings. There's a psychology of the human being. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we using it better? Because otherwise, this is a whole wasted effort. I mean, we commoditized diversity. We made it a multi-billion-dollar kind of business. To achieve what? And, we've seen the rollback. We've seen it occurring in some of the results that we're showing, from a woman's perspective on boards and in executive positions. So this is not me just making it up. It's a reality.
And before we end the conversation, looking back on your journey thus far, what advice would you give to your younger self?
You're not ever going to please anyone or everyone. So I think being true to yourself is really important. And I think in a way, I went through a stage when I went from being a school teacher to, working in corporate. I was aiming for something that I thought was going to give me everything that I was looking for in terms of success. And I think if I had to speak to my younger self now, I would be saying you are looking outside of yourself for what you could achieve. And I'm not saying it in a selfish way, but I do believe you have to be selfish. And that is, who am I? And what do I truly want? And I know people might say, well, didn't you do that? And I think you do with the best of the knowledge that you kind of have. And so it's really going on going on a voyage of discovery. I don't think you need to have cancer, address you to come up with an idea. But I think it's stuff I think I've always known. But I think I probably at some point sold out for the lie that a lot of us in my age group were sold. And I think we need to stop that. And I hope that I'm offering an opinion on alternatives that will benefit not only the head of all of us, but the heart and the soul as well.
I love it, Denise. My takeaway is that you owe it to yourself, that you've lived a life which you're proud of. I mean, that's what it's saying for me.
Yeah, it's a very good way of putting it.
Yeah. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, do hang on for just one more minute. I have a request for you. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Atlanta Diaries on Spotify, iTunes, or whichever platform you follow. Do join us in our mission to empower and inspire by sharing the podcast with a friend or colleague. It will be great if you can share on the social media platforms you follow, be it LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or any other. Please leave a review or rating on iTunes or Spotify. It really helps us reach a wider audience. Lastly, I wanted to share with you that many of my coaching clients and listeners have created a cheat sheet with their key takeaways from the episodes. I invite you to consider jotting down one or two key takeaways as you navigate your amazing journey. Have a wonderful rest of the day and see you next week for another inspiring journey on Atlanta Diaries.